Introducing Ashley Scott, a musical force hailing from the vibrant city of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the echoes of soul and rhythm infused the air. With globally chart-topping singles under his belt, Ashley stands as a powerhouse vocalist whose artistry transcends genres and captivates audiences worldwide. From his early years, Ashley's destiny was intertwined with music influenced by his aunt, Helen Scott, of the 3 Degrees and the Delfonics. This familial connection ignited a passion that would shape his journey as a genre-defying artist. Ashley's musical odyssey took root at the age of 3 and blossomed during his time at Howard University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in music. Surrounded by jazz legends and nurtured in the rich traditions of the Howard University Gospel Choir, Ashley honed his talents under the guidance of luminaries like Grady Tate and Kahembe Eichelberger. Throughout his career, Ashley has graced stages alongside icons such as Lady Alma, Bilal, and the Grammy Award-winning Take 6, showcasing his vocal prowess and studio acumen. His collaborations span a diverse range of artists and genres, reflecting his versatility and passion for innovation. Beyond his contributions to the music industry, Ashley is a visionary and community leader. As the founder of the Soulful Sounds series and the host of Soulful Sounds Radio, he shares his knowledge and passion for R&B music with audiences across the globe. Additionally, as a co-founder of the Artists United, Ashley is committed to educating youth through the iCare Academy program, embodying a spirit of philanthropy and mentorship. For Ashley, music is not just a means of expression, but a transformative force that transcends boundaries and empowers communities. His journey is a testament to the enduring power of art and education, inspiring others to reach for their dreams and make a positive impact on the world. Ashley, how old were you when you realized you had such a prominent aunt?
I was about 3 years old, and it's funny because it kind of segues into the first song. But the first album I ever had as on my kitty record player in my room was a 3 Degrees album. And so, if we're going into the songs that have kind of transformed my life, "Giving Up, Giving In" is one of those songs.
Give us a bit of insight into the family life at that age, what your family members was like, sibling rivalry, and had it not been for your aunt, even at such a tender age, did you have any inclinations of going into any other field other than music?
No, well, so I grew up with both my parents married at the time. I had an older brother, half brother. I don't really say half, but he lived with his mother more so and stayed with us on the weekends. Um, on my father's side, it was, my dad was one of 4 children at that time. So he had 3 sisters and it was 8 grandchildren from my grandfather. So we had a pretty nice sized family and we were all pretty close knit. I was the youngest at the time, so I couldn't do all the things that the big kids would do. And whenever my parents went over to, say, my Aunt Helen's house, it was like, okay, put the kid in the room, let him watch cartoons and stuff like that. But I wasn't watching cartoons. I was watching at that time. They did a BBC special at the Royal Albert Hall
Mm.
in October of 1979, and I was watching her video of that as they were back by the Royal Philharmonic. So that show is what kind of fascinated me about being on stage and music and just you heard every instrument on that video, and just it was just a great show. So I was mesmerized by that, and that's what kind of got me into music.
What was going through your mind? Do you recall?
I was shocked that I knew the person on the album cover and that she was related to me. That was one thing, but "Giving Up, Giving In" was it was just a great song, and it was the opening track for that album at the time. The album was called New Dimensions, and music of that time, it's hard to not talk about. It's hard to talk about a song and not talk about the full album experience, because most of the time it was the album that, of course, made the song and made the experience of the song. So for that whole New Dimensions album was very um, it was a mesmerizing of an album. It was the first time that they had started working with Giorgio Moroder, and the whole first side was a continuous medley of tracks. They didn't fade out. One song went directly to the next. So you had so that's what made that album special, as well as the B-side songs as well. It was hits on that side as well with The Runner and Woman in Love. So that entire New Dimensions album was a huge comeback album for them as well, because they hadn't had any chart success since the Philadelphia International years, and that was about maybe 2 years prior. So they had about two albums in between Philadelphia International and the New Dimensions album, but they didn't really have a lot of chart success. So for them working with Giorgio Moroder, it was a different feel. Obviously, that hard Euro disco feel was something new to them. But one thing about the album was that, and it taught me, no matter who you work with, maintain your sound in the music. And you especially know that it's them on Giving Up, Giving In with the opening, ha, because that was their trademark harmonies in the intros of most of their hits, like Dirty Old Man, When Will I See You Again, etc., etc.
Interesting that you raised When Will I See You Again, because I just made a note of it, because I remember in 1973, I was in Taunton, sitting in the car, and this When Will I See You Again came on the radio. And I knew at that time that Prince Charles, young Prince Charles, was a huge fan of the 3 Degrees. What did you make of that, if you knew that at all?
So he actually didn't meet them until 1978. They had met several other members of the royal family during those earlier years. And I think there's a picture of Princess Anne presenting Sheila Valerie and Fayette Pinckney at that time, and Richard Barrett with a gold record for When Will I See You Again. My aunt Helen was an original member with Fayette Pinckney when they were 15 years old, and Janet Harmon in the early 1960s on Swan Records. So my aunt left with Janet Harmon, and then Sheila Ferguson and Valerie Holiday joined. And when Fayette Pinckney left, my aunt came back in 1976. So they didn't meet Prince Charles until 1978, I believe, at the Eastbourne Country Club. And so they also performed at his 30th birthday party, and that's where you see the photo of him doing the bump, or what they call the Royal Boogie, and the British press nicknamed them Charlie's Angels after that. So she was there for during that particular time, and still is there to this very day with Valerie Holiday and Freddie Poole. And it was great to see that they had that royal seal of approval. And going back to Giving Up, Giving In, the song had a resurgence about a year or so ago, because Spotify did a playlist with now King Charles. And I think that was one of the top 5 songs on his Spotify playlist. So it had a whole resurgence a few years ago when he did that thing with Spotify.
So give us some insight into growing up in Philadelphia to those of us that are uninitiated and obviously from across the pond.
Growing up in Philadelphia in the 80s was a great time. I grew up in a middle class African American neighborhood, went to a public school. At that time, I was bused to a different neighborhood, not far away, but um, the school I went to was one of the top schools in the city in terms of scholars and things of that nature. I transferred to a different school for junior high school in seventh and eighth grade. And in high school, I went to a college prep school versus a performing arts school. So my college preparatory school kind of let you pick your classes, each year, and you called all the teachers by their first name, and it was just a different experience. I actually went to high school with Vivian Green, who is a soul artist out of Philadelphia. You may remember her from her song "Emotional Roller Coaster" in 2004. So we went to high school together. Her sister and I were in the same class, and she was 2 years behind me. So that's what growing up in Philadelphia was like. It was constantly music all around. Everybody wanted to be in a group, especially in the 90s when Boyz II Men came out, that revolutionized male group. So everybody wanted to start singing a cappella in high school and being Jodeci or Boyz II Men, if you will, the bad boys versus the good guys.
You mentioned that you were bused to a different school. Any particular reason that
Not
occurred?
not bust in a sense of leaving my neighborhood and going to another cultural area. It was just, you know, I had to go to the bus stop because they had school buses that went to different parts of the city to go to this particular school. So it was a public school. It wasn't, anything of leaving my neighborhood to go to another neighborhood or a better neighborhood, because I actually lived probably in a better area than the school was in. But yeah, so it wasn't bust in the sense of how they would say back in the 70s or
That's why I had to ask. When did your musical curiosity for performing begin, and how?
Again, I would say it started early, but I didn't really start taking it seriously until high school. Everybody, once high school came around, it was like, oh, you can sing, you have to be in a talent show. And, or because I was not the athlete in high school. So, I was the last person to pick in gym class when it came to picking teams for basketball or any other type of, athletic stuff. But I was definitely musical, and I had no problem singing to the young ladies to, make them fall in love for 5 minutes. So,
Were you fairly confident as a young lad at school, or awkward and what have you?
I was shy. I was probably more shy, talking to people. But if it came time to go sing to that girl over there, it was no problem doing that because I would make them smile and they would say, "Oh," and give you a hug and everything. So that made up for it.
I have visions of young Ashley doing that.
Yeah.
And family life was relatively happy. Church involved in any way?
Yeah, started going to church in high school. My parents didn't necessarily go, but other relatives did. So I started going with them and got saved at a young age. And once I got to Howard University, I joined the Howard Gospel Choir, and I had that made up for not having the early gospel music in my career, in my life.
It made up for not having it. Interesting remark.
Well, because I didn't listen to a lot of gospel at home, and it wasn't necessarily played. My parents were playing Earth, Wind, and Fire, Stevie Wonder, Rick James, all the secular stuff. So I didn't really get a lot of gospel at home. But once I started going to church, and Kirk Franklin hit in the '90s, gospel became more mainstream. So I didn't get the Clark sisters in the early records of the '80s. Now I did have a neighbor that had a group with his brothers, and I would go to different churches, as following them and learning, getting gospel in church. So I did kind of get it. It just kind of came back to me as I'm talking, but I did get it going to church with neighbors because again, they had a family gospel group and they recorded albums and stuff and were selling albums at their concerts and stuff. So more so the '80s gospel quartets, and 5-man groups, quintets as well. So I did get some, but not a lot. But once I got to in the Howard Gospel Choir, I was learning anthems and spirituals, hymns, contemporary stuff, traditional stuff, and just going from there.
It's a very different experience, isn't it, singing gospel, religious songs, than traditional songs. Were you aware of the difference at that young age?
Yes, because a lot of the songs that we were singing at that time were definitely hitting home, spiritually. Uh, Howard Gospel Choir recorded a song called "Just for Me," and it was a powerful song, just speaking of how, Jesus died on the cross just for
Do you
you.
remember it at all? Are you able to give us a line?
Just for me, just for me, just for me, just for me. They pierced him in his side. He hung his head and he died. He did all that just for me.
Wow.
The song is actually in the hymnal now as well. But it was just a powerful song. And when you think about it, it hit everybody every time we sang it. And we would be singing it in tears at times, just thinking about what you're singing and ministering at that time.
So at school, people recognised that you had a voice. Were you being entered for competitions?
I didn't really do any competitions, more so just, performing. So high school talent shows, doing a song every year. Um, in college, I just kind of focused more so on the choir and just learning the music that I had to learn for school. And I had a jazz upbringing in college as well. It was either jazz or classical, so I picked jazz because it was the closest thing I could get to R&B.
Let's get on to your second choice. When you get right down to it, by the Delfonics. Why have you selected this one?
So my mother grew up on the same street as the Delfonics. Randy Kane, William Poogie Hart, and Wilbert Hart were like brothers to her and my three aunts on my mother's side. Um, Growing up, I, I was close with Randy Kane. I met William Hart and his brother when I was in high school, and that relationship kind of grew from there. um, I always knew the songs, and anytime you would see the old video of "La La Means I Love You" on TV, they would say, "Hey, there's Uncle Randy. There's Uncle Poogie. There's Uncle Wilbert," and I would just watch the video. I didn't really see them in concert till I was in college, and I started kind of diving more into their records around that time. I mean, again, I knew the hits, what did not blow your mind, "La Means I Love You," but I didn't really start going deeper into their catalog until in college, and I saw them perform in Washington D.C. when I was there, and that song was the opening number, and people just kind of went crazy. It's I think it's a beautiful song, and the orchestration of it is amazing, and the ending part of the song where it goes, "When you get right down to it, don't you want to live the moments again and again and again?" That's, I mean, lyrically, it takes you somewhere as well. It makes you think about the good times in life. And so now hearing it, because Randy and Poogie have passed away, and I also credit Major Harris because he was a Delphonic before he recorded "Love Won't Let Me Wait." And he was a replacement for Randy, but he also joined in the 90s. Poogie, Randy, and Wilbert had a set. I'm sorry, Poogie, Randy, and Major had a set of Delphonics, and Wilbert had his own set of Delphonics. So there was always two sets going, but Major's passed away as well. So, just hearing that song, it makes me think about them and miss them a lot more. And, the orchestration of the song gives me chills. So sometimes I get a little choked up hearing it, but it's just a beautiful song. So that's one that makes me think about them all the time.
How did your parents view this burgeoning music career?
They supported it. They always wanted me to have something to fall back on. My mother is a teacher, and most of my aunts on that side are educators, and so there was, they always wanted me to be a substitute teacher or teach music in the school and that kind of thing. Um, in my later years, in my mom's final, 10 years before retirement, it it was a lot more stressful. Kids were a lot more to deal with, and I just didn't want to do that. Seeing how she came home stressed every day from work, and I did work in the schools as what they call a wraparound or a one-on-one for a kid that may have mental health issues like ADHD or things of that nature. So they also called that job like being a shadow. And so that one was equal to the 30 that my mom used to deal with all the time. Um, so I didn't really want to work with kids around that time because I want to be able to kind of share the music and share the lessons. I don't want to tell someone to sit down and be quiet every 5 minutes. And nowadays kids will try to fight teachers. So I didn't want to end up on World Star Hip Hop, in one of those viral scenes. So
Yeah.
I
What?
do have a passion for education. I would say it's probably more on a collegiate level
Mhm.
rather than high school or elementary. But again, going back to your question, my parents were very supportive of it. They wanted me to get as much as I could get out out of the music and all the lessons that I could get from private lessons to education and continuing on. So they were very supportive.
What did you learn about yourself working with this young person with ADHD?
I I learned about compassion, um, and but I also it was hard to maintain a straight face in a class because I hadn't been in a classroom, since my years of school. So, when the kids were, I have to admit, sometimes I have a warped sense of humor, and I had to kind of hide my face when kids were acting up and doing things. But
Well, that's about survival, isn't it?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The dark humor associated with some jobs.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the kids were doing some crazy things in the class, and at times I just had to like put my head down and hide my face because deep down it was hilarious, but it just kind of took me back to things that I witnessed in school as well. But it definitely taught me to have a little bit more empathy for kids nowadays because kids are being now diagnosed with all this stuff. They didn't have it when I was younger, or let alone generations like my parents before
Have you
me.
ever been tested?
No, I haven't, and I actually do wonder if I have some things going on. I have not.
Tell me about leaving high school and then going on to university. What was that transition like for you?
It was an amazing, being at Howard University was the best time of my life. Um, Even going back there as much as I do to just walk on the campus or for homecoming, it's almost like walking through a time warp. Um, it was just the best time of my life. I couldn't have made a better decision than to attend Howard University. Um, the friends, the faculty, um, learning under learning jazz voice under Kahembe Eichelberger and Grady Tate and the late Webster Lewis. That's just something you can't get anywhere else. Grady was, I guess, more known as a jazz drummer, but he could sing as well, and he knew every jazz tune in the book. Webster was just one of the most amazing arrangers, from his own albums on CBS Records and the work that he did with Barry White and others. He was just a fine arranger. So Webster taught us to always remain independent and to not go after a major record deal because he said a record deal was nothing but a credit card. What they put out, you will pay back. And he wanted us to, own our masters and maintain that ownership. And he knew that the entertainment industry was changing, but he just didn't know what it was about to change to. But he said to, own your masters, and you have to work hard. And it's not just about the performance, but it's about the business. And going back to that part of the statement, I knew that in college because of my family background. So throughout the 80s and 90s, between the 3 degrees and the Delfonics, there was a whole lot of court battles going on that I can't quite, go in depth about. But that's how I knew that this was a business, and the performance was
That wasn't a
part of it.
deterrent for you, watching those legal suits?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't. But I learned a lot from it, and I learned the processes of what to do and what not to do from those situations. So I'm thankful for that, for those lessons, and learning that early.
How much were you aware of your own development transitioning to Howard University and learning how to express yourself through music, if you felt that at all?
It was it wasn't difficult. It was just more so exposing myself to different to jazz and to gospel. Again, I grew up listening to Philadelphia International and Earth, Wind and Fire and Stevie Wonder and Michael Jackson and going into the 90s R&B. So to now have to learn other stuff, now I'm listening to Misty by Johnny Mathis and singing it on a student recital, or learning When I Fall in Love by Nat King Cole and singing gospel choir songs with, from commission, or, Mississippi Mass Choir. Just diving into all that different genres is what um, was an easy transition, but just, a great learning experience.
We're on to track 3, Right Here, Right Now by Nathan Heathman. Why have you selected this one?
So again, I said that there was two great story. There's two sets of Delfonics, and so my freshman year there was Randy Kane, William Hart, and Major Harris. The second year was Wilbert Hart and two other singers that he had in his group at the time. And playing keyboard for Wilbert that night was Nathan Heathman. He was a DC pianist and vocalist, and cool guy. I was like, okay. We linked up, and I told him I was a music student at Howard. And after the show, at night, he was like, all right, I'm gonna make sure you get home safely, because cabs in DC don't pick up, people of color at nighttime at that particular point, just because of being afraid to, getting robbed and things of that nature. So uh, Nathan was invited me out to a show a few months later. He said, I'm also the musical director for Jean Carn. I said, oh, I met Miss Carn at Howard because my freshman year she came and lectured to the class, to our jazz vocal class. And she remembered me from Howard. And from there, Nathan, he took me under his wing, um, just showing me different types of music and helping me perform. He had an open mic that he was doing in DC, so I went and sat in with him weekly, and I was watching him with Gene Carn. And so in 2000, he recorded his first album, and the album was called Right Here, Right Now. And so that was the song I thought was the most pretty on the record. It was just a basic piano. It's almost like a wedding song, and it's just a beautiful ballad. Um, Fast forward to 2004, and it was in October of 2004. I happened to take a vacation, and I came over to the UK to see my aunt and the Three Degrees perform, and they were on a disco tour with the Emotions, Candy Staten, Evelyn Champagne King, the Pointer Sisters, Odyssey, and the Emotions. And so I went to two of the shows on the tour, uh, Wembley Arena and the MEN Arena in Manchester. And so when I was coming back on Tuesday, October 10th, that's when I flew out of the UK. And the previous night, being 5 hours ahead, my mind was getting wrapped around traveling Tuesday morning back home to Philadelphia and just getting back into the regimen of life. And on October 16th of 2004, Nathan had a tribute concert to Luther Vandross scheduled. And I checked his website that Monday night, and not saying he didn't have any performances, but I was looking at his calendar and there was nothing listed up until January, as far as January. And that puzzled me when I was in the UK. So the next day, left the UK, and I had a layover in Boston. And I didn't take my cell phone with me because you didn't take it international in 2004. So I had a few minutes left on this prepaid calling card, and I said, oh, let me check my voicemail messages on the cell phone. So I got a call from one of my friends. Her name was Latrice Jones. She was a vocalist in Philadelphia. Her father is a bass player, and his name is Tony Jones. And Tony would also play with Norman Connors and Nathan and Gene and that whole family because they were always doing shows together. And Latrice left me a voicemail message and said, Ashley, my dad called me and said that Nathan from DC passed away. And he said, I think this is the same Nathan that you're always talking about. And she said, I didn't want you to not know. So I stood there in Boston. I'm like, no, this isn't happening. But, a few more dollars left on this calling card. Let me call the house. And at that time, phones had this thing called call intercept, where you state your name before and they'll try to find the caller. It's just when it first came out. And his manager, April, answered the phone at the house. And she said, Ashley. I said, April? And then I froze up like I'm freezing up now. And I said, tell me this isn't true. And she said, he's gone. And I cried like a baby in Boston at that payphone. So it was the weirdest thing. So that Saturday when he had a scheduled concert in Delaware, which is not far from Philadelphia, that was the day of his funeral in 2004. So fast forward to 2022. I used to always go see, when I was in college in Washington, D.C., I used to always go see Nathan and Gene Carn or Norman Connors at a jazz club called Blues Alley. It's a world famous jazz club in Washington, D.C., where Phyllis Hyman, everybody has played, Duke Ellington, Lena Horne, everybody has been in Blues Alley. I finally had my first show at Blues Alley in 2022. And I cried because I wish he was here to play for me. And the first time I did Blues Alley in 2022, I did a special theme show of performing my original music mixed with other Philadelphia songs. But I couldn't necessarily perform Nathan's music on that particular show. But last year, in 2023, in October, I had my second show at Blues Alley, and I did Right Here, Right Now on stage. And I'm just as I'm talking now with a frog in my throat, that's how I had to sing the song, because I was on stage in tears. So that's why I picked that song.
When did you turn professional? When was the first time that you were actually paid for a gig?
I would say right after college.
Tell me about that event.
One of my former bosses and coworkers were giving her mother a birthday party, and she wanted me and one of my friends that I just met at the time. He was a keyboard player, or he is a keyboard player. He's actually one of my producers now. And we did piano and vocal, just R&B stuff at her mom's birthday party, and she paid us. So that was probably one of my first paying gigs.
And how did that feel?
Felt rich for a minute. Wanted to go out and have sirloin steak and baked potato and filet mignon and paint the town red. But it was a great experience, though. It was a great experience. And
has the industry met your expectations of the rumors you heard about it growing up?
Yeah, it did. It has.
Give me an insight into one of your worst business dealings. You don't need to name names. I'm not after names. The first time you learned a hard lesson, put it that way.
I have to come back to you on that one.
That's okay. Well, tell me about the highlight of your best gig to date. What was that experience like?
Blues Alley, 2022. That was the best gig ever. One of the best nights of my life. Because
Did anybody film it for you?
I got some video from it, yes, and I have put some of it on YouTube. But it was a great experience because, again, that's where I used to go to shows. And so to finally be on that stage and have that, it was a bucket list item, and so to perform in that room, and with the blood on the wall of Phyllis Hyman and Dizzy Gillespie and Lena Horne, all those spirits in that room and on that stage, it was just an amazing experience. And to see DC being a second home, because I lived there for college, seeing everybody that came out, it was like my old Howard Gospel Choir mates and school folks and just music friends from DC. To see them all in the room, it was almost like I felt like a Baptist preacher when they stomped, when they say, they kind of say the statement of, when I look back over my life, all of those faces that were in the audience, those people had been there. So it was just it was an emotional night.
So when you graduated from Howard, did you move back home until you landed on your feet, or did you continue to move on in life and so
I
forth?
came back home and immediately jumped into the Philadelphia music scene, but more so on the business side. In college, I I was a music business major, so I in college I interned at a radio station my last semester in DC. But every summer I came home to work at an amphitheater, and that amphitheater had a summer concert series every summer. And so the who's who of classic soul uh, played that amphitheater every year. So the Whispers, the OJs, Ray Goodman Brown, Tina Marie, um, the Blue Magic, the Delfonics, Stylistics, all those classic artists, Ohio players, Confunction. I was meeting these people every year and developing relationships with them. The Dells. Um, I mean, so I met musicians, I met producers, and just started, talking to people and developing relationships from there. To where, if they weren't playing my venue in the summertime, some of these artists and their band members would call me in the other, times of the year to say, "Hey, we're in town, come on down and hang out." And so I built relationships with a lot of people from working, quote unquote, backstage, and learning production, and learning how to run a venue and put on a concert. So a lot of my business came from learning concert promotion.
So as you were talking about that, just as you was talking about that, I was writing down, what would your wish gig look like?
My wish gig, let's see, if I had to open a show for someone,
Why open a show for someone? This is your own show.
okay, so
You're,
so I would say my my bucket list gig, or my everyday prayer, is to perform abroad in the UK.
with whom? Who would be your guest artist?
Hmm. I mean, I'll shoot for this moon, Stevie Wonder, Lionel Richie. Let's go big. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I mean,
And what would you duet with him? I'm putting you on the spot.
wow. Stevie Wonder, probably "You Are the Sunshine of My Life." Um, but "As" is probably my all-time favorite. That was one of my dad's favorite songs, so that's the one he really nailed on record every day. Um, and for Lionel, I would probably say "Still."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just a beautiful song.
We're on to track 4, Far Away.
We're the stories are coming right in on time with the music, I have to say. So "Far Away," going back to when I first got out of college, coming home, I was working at that venue. Philadelphia had a resurgence in 2000 of music. It was almost like the Philly sound kind of came full circle 30 years later. It wasn't Gamble and Huff, though they had a few artists signed, younger acts signed in 1999 that they were promoting. However, there was a different sound coming out of Philadelphia. It was still soulful. It was still um, very exquisite arrangements and full, strings, and very lush, as the Philly sound was known for. But it was more updated with a slight bit of a hip hop feel. And the industry tried to coin that phrase "neo soul."
Mhm.
So there was a weekly event held at a very small club here. It was called the Black Lily. It was at a place called the Five Spot. And the Five Spot was a very small club in an alley in the historic section of downtown Philadelphia. And on that stage weekly were the Jazzy Fat Nasties, Jaguar Wright, Lady Alma, and Kindred the Family Soul. And we would and so not only did you see them each do at least a 30 to 45-minute set, these were local artists. They didn't have records out at the time. Jaguar, I think, got signed to the Roots label first, but her record didn't come out till, a few years later. Um, Kindred was signed to Hidden Beach, and Jill Scott got signed to Hidden Beach as well. So the first record that kind of came out, I would say, for the entire neo soul movement was probably from, or at least the Philly neo soul artists, because Erykah Badu had already been out in 1997. You had D'Angelo already, but the Jazzy Fat Nasties came out in 99. Then you had Jill Scott come out with her first album, and Music Soul Child came out the same summer of 2000. So they kind of kicked off that whole movement and brought, with the Roots as well, backing them up as a band. But and also the touch of jazz production team. So you have Carvin Higgins and Ivan Barrios. You had Andre Harrison, Vidal Davis. You had Keith Pelzer and Darren Henson. You also had James Poyser and Victor Duplay. And so those producers just created a whole new sound for some of these artists. And Kindred, again, was a husband and wife duo, but to see them weekly, they were just an explosive act. And they just drew you in with their music. So Far Away is obviously their biggest hit from the first album, but we knew those songs 3 years prior to that album coming out, and seeing them come out, at that album release party in, I want to say, 2003 was just a monumental moment. And I remember Jill Scott came out and introduced him, and everybody was so hyped. She said, "We waited and we waited, and everybody was just happy, and the day is finally here." And the album came out, and Far Away was such a big hit, and I was just so happy for them. And the song also has meaning now because we go through so much daily in life. You need those. Mental health is at an all-time high of topics and people dealing with things. So we all want to get far away from here.
So talk to me now about the relationship with your parents, because you're now an adult. What does that look like?
So my parents are divorced now. They were married of almost 30 years, give or take a little lower or a little less, 29, maybe 32. I can't remember. I have a great relationship with both parents. We all live in the same neighborhood. I talk to them both every day. They love being grandparents to my two daughters. I have an 8 and a 5-year-old.
A handful.
Yes, a whole lot of a handful. Um, so they love being grandparents, and they're still supportive of my music. Um, every time I'm releasing music, they're excited to see the success that I've had.
You also mentioned that you had a half brother. What's your relationship like with them?
He's my best friend.
Oh,
I call him for everything. We don't talk as much as I would like to. We were living in the same neighborhood for a while, but he just moved across town again. I have a nephew from him. Don't really see much of my nephew as I would like, but yeah, we have a great relationship. I take him to my gigs with me to sell my merchandise whenever I'm doing local stuff.
I was going to ask you whether any of them showed any sort of musical prowess at all, other than selling your merchandise.
Yeah, I put my brother to work though. So
Absolutely love it. So when you became a parent, there's one of my favourite expressions. I have no idea where it came from. And this is true because my two are 27 and 25. I remember becoming a parent, and this phrase resonated with me. My kids tell me I'm wrong, my father was right, something like that. I've forgotten completely how it goes, but when you grow up and you realize that what your parents were telling you is right, and your kids tell you that it's wrong, your kids are probably a bit too young for that now. But that was a moment that resonated with me. How did becoming a father for the first time impact you?
It was scary at first, just because this was a new thing for life. The one saying that comes to mind is you never stop being a parent. So this is like my forever job now, you know. So especially being the father of a daughter, you have to be extra protective. Um, and when the second one came, the same feeling came along. So now I have to protect both of them, but still want them to grow and be who they want to be. You know, they both love music as well. They've got the musical bug, and right now they're in dance class, but they love musicals, and they're in their Disney princess phase and dress up phase right now. So my youngest daughter last week, she actually performed in school for the first time in front of everybody. And her teacher had to send me a video, so they had a karaoke machine up there, and so she loves the movie Frozen. So she got up and sang "Let It Go," and but they always ask me, um, every if not every day, Daddy, can I go on stage with you? And I'll say, yeah, one day. And can we sing "Dance the Night Away" and "Don't Throw Our Love Away" and together? And they want to sing my songs with me. So they're my biggest supporters. And I said, yeah, but you got to learn the lyrics. I can't put you in front of the microphone if you don't know learn the lyrics. And they pretty much know them. So
I want to touch on one thing slightly sensitive, but I'm curious. Um, I've got a daughter. You've got two. And it's got a few years off. How do you view what's happening in America right now with regards to women?
that's a great question. Um, I think having proper but serious talks with them about life um, will definitely have to come into play. They need to know, you know. I mean, that's a deep question.
It
Um,
is.
they have to know that it's their body, it's their choice, but also not to give give their give themselves to everyone
Well, it's
and
not that. I'm talking about the abortion situation in America.
that's kind of what I'm getting at. But I was
Okay.
kind of
I'm
going,
sorry.
yeah, I was kind of talking about the whole gambit of it.
One of my favorite groups now that you've chosen is Chicago. Come on, tell me the reason why you've selected. Does anybody know what time it is?
So Chicago is my dad's all-time favorite band, Chicago and Earth, Wind and Fire. So my dad used to work in retail for a long time, and he would open up his store every morning. He says with the first Chicago album, Chicago Transit Authority, with that particular song. And I think one of the best days of my dad's life was around 2007 when a friend of his or a friend of my parents bought my parents and I tickets to see the first Earth, Wind, and Fire Chicago tour that happened that they started doing. And the show was amazing. It was one band, everybody was playing everybody's stuff and singing everybody's stuff. Chicago guys would start singing some Earth, Wind, and Fire songs with them. Philip Bailey was singing "If You Leave Me Now," with them, and it was just an amazing show. So, working in the industry, not just being an artist, but also working behind the scenes, I'm a member of the Recording Academy, which is the organization that puts on, excuse me,
Bless you.
that puts on the Grammy Awards. And I became a board member of the Philadelphia chapter. And so in 2014, I decided I was going to go to the Grammy Awards. So got my ticket. It was in January of 2014. Had issues getting to California, like planes, trains, and automobiles because we had bad weather, but I made it. And one of my board members said, or our chapter folks said, "Hey, here's a pass. You can go to the rehearsal inside the arena." So of course I know what rehearsal was. Um, didn't know what I was going to see when I walked into the LA arena at that particular day. And so I'm walking down the steps, and I saw, you know, different people sitting in a certain section, and I didn't know what I was going to see. I didn't even read who was performing because I had to just grab a bag and get out of here because my fight almost got canceled due to bad weather. So I get in there and my foot hits the floor of the arena, and you hear over the loudspeaker, "Ladies and gentlemen, Chicago and Robin Thicke." I looked up at the stage and they started playing "Does Anybody Know What Time It Is?" And my dad is still alive. However, I gulped because I was like, okay, he would be going crazy over this right now. So in 2014, there was a performance of Robin Thicke in Chicago, and they did a medley of Chicago songs. And then, of course, they had to end it off with "Blurred Lines" because that was the biggest song of that year. So that's why I chose that song, because that was my dad's favorite band. But when I walked into that arena, I was like, oh boy, I just gulped. Like, where is he? Oh, he's back in Philly right now. I'm here. I finished rehearsing. And just like, I was like, so they just started playing all the songs. And of course, I've been hearing them all my life. So I was just choked up. So I was like, wow, he would love to see this. But he was back in the snow, and I was in sunny California, enjoying myself at the Grammys. So I had to call him and say, "You won't believe what I just saw." He goes, "I believe it." And he hung up on me.
They say never meet your heroes. Have you been disappointed by meeting any of yours?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
Who has surprised you then? Nicely surprised you?
I would say she's not here anymore, but the Queen of Soul, Aretha Franklin. She
Why?
did a, she did a show at the venue, and a couple of people said, you know, be careful because some days she is not nice, you know. But I said hello, and I'm always a polite person. But she said, "Oh, nice to meet you," you know, nice venue and things of that nature. So I said, "It's an honor," and kept it moving. So I was surprised I caught her on a good day, I guess.
So we touched on faith. You sang in a gospel choir. Where does faith sit in your life today, if at all?
Right now, it's everything. It's what keeps me going, along with my kids, and just trying to provide for them. But just having faith that everything is going to work out for your benefit. You know, that scripture is really what I try to live by. I mean, I do worry about things at times because we're human. However, you know, when you really think about it, most things do work out for your good.
Your final choice, Your Writer's Rain by Will Downing.
So the song is a classic song by one of my all-time favorite groups, the Stylistics, originally recorded. It was written by Tom Bell and Linda Creed, so it was a part of the Philly sound. Hearing that the original version of the record, I thought that that was just one of the most prettiest melodies I've ever heard in my life. If I had to have a ranking chart of pretty songs and just using the word pretty, I think that that's at the top of the list for me. Russell Tompkins Jr. of the Stylistics, and Arian Love knew my dad from just in our living in our certain area of town, and of course they knew my aunt from being an entertainer and traveling the world, because they were always both groups were always in England, you know, in the late '70s a lot. So I got a chance to meet them, you know, in like around my college years, and have maintained a relationship kind of with most of the group members of the Stylistics. But I just thought that that was the most prettiest song, and they were just one of my all-time favorite groups. In college, Webster Lewis, he was working with Will Downing at the time on a remake that Will did of "I Don't Want to Lose You," and he brought Will Downing to Howard to lecture to our class. And he also did how at Howard we would always record songs for the jazz ensemble CD every year, and Will actually came and sat in on a session and helped coach us through the vocal of that particular song. So fast forward after college, I met Will, and he remembered me from Howard, and so we maintained a coolness there. He went ill for a minute, but bounced back from an illness. And I remember chatting with him about maybe 10 years ago. I sent him a text just to say hello, just keeping in touch, and he pulled me in on his team to work for him so I kind of work on his business team, handling admin stuff and everything. And I've been doing that for about 10 years now. So fast forward last year in 2023, I asked him to help me produce one of my original forthcoming songs. And because the producer of the song lived on the West Coast, and so I could have found a studio here, but I needed somebody to really help me produce this song. So I said, can you help me out on this? And he said, yeah, no problem. Come on up to the studio and we'll cut it. So when I got to his studio to record my song, I look on his computer and I see a file there. And it said Writer's Reign. I said, is that the stylistics you use Writer's Reign? He said, yep. I said, you're recording that one on the next album? He said, yes, sir. I said, do you need any oohs and ahs on it? He said, well, did you think I was just going to let you come up here and do one song? He said, so after we finished my forthcoming song, I did some backgrounds on Yours Writer's Reign, Will Downing's version, which is on his current CD that was released in the end of 2023. And, who can say that they sang background on a version of one of their all-time favorite classics? So that's why I picked that song.
Congratulations. Great story. I'm going to take you back to 3-year-old, holding that album of the 3 Degrees. Looking back now on your career, what would you like to go back and say to him?
I would say, don't be fearful. I would say, just go for it. Don't care what anybody thinks. Just make the music that you want to make. And I wish I did that a lot earlier, but I'm happy to be doing it now.